Oyatade with that report. Let's get the analysis now. Hussein Ibish joins us. Hussein Ibish is a senior resident scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Why are these two meeting now?
Well, it's very important, and it's a follow-up for a visit by the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, which happened last month. There are increasing efforts by the United States to solidify the relationship with Saudi Arabia, which really got better after Joe Biden's trip to Jeddah and the big GCC+3 meeting, plus a day of one-on-one consultations that Biden had with Saudi leaders. And then there was this hiccup in last October over OPEC oil price quota reductions, and there was this sense that Saudi Arabia might be partnering with Russia against the interests of Western consumers. But it didn't happen. The Saudis were right when they said there wouldn't be an oil price increase. There wasn't. And so that's been tamped down. In the meanwhile, even though Saudi Arabia is trying a rapprochement with Iran, and even though it's building stronger ties with China, both sides are working hard to maintain the core security relationship between Washington and Riyadh, and partnering on Sudan, on trying to end the war in Yemen, and cooperation, very quiet cooperation, sort of under the radar, in building a new regime of containment and deterrence against Iran that the U.S. is putting together through a lot of bilateral stuff. There's the U.S.-Israeli efforts, U.S.-Saudi efforts, U.S.-UAE efforts that all are increasingly interlocking. And I think the U.S. is trying to increase the amount of de facto cooperation between these countries that are worried about Iran's hegemony in the region.
Hussein, thank you for that really detailed sweep of exactly what is being discussed. Can I take you back to the OPEC issue and the Iran issue? From Washington's perspective, which of these two is the most disturbing?
Well, for sure, OPEC. So the U.S. doesn't mind the exchange of embassies or ambassadors, and the reopening of embassies between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Iran is not entering an alliance with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is not, embracing Iran. What they're doing is de-escalating. They're diffusing tensions because it's in the interests of both parties now not to do that. And, the Saudis also, among other things, are trying to convince the Iranians that even if the Israelis were to make an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, which Israel keeps threatening, that retaliating by striking Saudi Arabia or the UAE would be a misstep. And they're sort of trying to get out of the way of a possible Israeli retaliation. Washington doesn't mind negotiations. It doesn't mind diplomatic relations. It even wasn't that upset with the Arab countries re-embracing Syria under Assad. So that's okay. The OPEC Plus issue is really an irritant, and it's a potential problem because Saudi Arabia uses OPEC Plus and its cooperation with Russia to create a floor and ceiling for the price of oil. That's crucial for its economic transformation plans, which are existentially necessary and not postponable. But to the West, if it comes at the cost to Western consumers, it's going to look like the Saudis gouging Americans, and it's going to look like they're doing it in collusion with Moscow against Kiev. And that's going to be potentially the source of a lot of tension. So that's the biggest, ticking bomb out there.
And you described that again so vividly. But behind that, there is this real genuine level of proper, strong cooperation between the two.
Absolutely. I think if you look under the hood, so to speak, to compare this to a vehicle, it looks like there's a lot of tension and dynamism on the outside, and there is. But under the hood, where the working groups are, where the military groups are, where the alliances are, Task Force 59, a U.S. naval mission, which is creating this remarkable surveillance project in the waters of the Gulf, and then they're going to move to the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea in coordination with local countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain. In the Red Sea, it'll certainly involve Egypt and probably Israel, as well as Saudi Arabia. All of this stuff is going on quietly. And there is a good deal of cooperation, especially in terms of creating a new regime of containment and deterrence against Iran, but again, very quietly. I think nobody wants to make a big deal out of this because they don't want to saber rattle. There is a real preference in the Biden administration for negotiations and talks over conflict and confrontation. At the same time, as long as the talks are not going on with Iran, as long as Iran is, continues to inch towards nuclear weapons status and maintain this network of armed gangs around the Middle East and militias that are attacking and killing American troops and contractors in Iraq and Syria and elsewhere, then, there really is the need to build up more containment and deterrence against Tehran. And the Saudis are a big part of that.
Hussein Ibish, thank you very much indeed for that analysis, giving us a real sense of context and depth. Thank you so very much indeed, Hussein Ibish, senior resident scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute. We continue to watch the Secretary of State Blinken on his visit to Saudi Arabia, speaking with the MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, no less. Hussein Ibish there giving us a sense of what this visit means and why it is so important.